I'm going to start with a question, and it's a small group, so everybody can answer. But let's just start. Who's the most compelling communicator you've ever heard? Churchill. You've heard Churchill. I'm impressed. But you've read Churchill and read about Churchill.
I've seen him on TV.
And seen him on TV. All right, so we have a Churchill. What else? Teddy Roosevelt. All right, interesting.
Reagan.
Tony Blair. We got some British flair there. Yep. Who else do we have?
Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton. He comes to mind for me, and I'm a Republican. He comes to mind for me. He's very good. Who you got? Most compelling communicator you've ever heard?
I really like Desmond Tutu.
Desmond Tutu. Okay.
Andy Stanley's pretty good.
Andy Stanley is very good. Okay. Come on, ladies in the front row. What you got? We'll find out tonight about Paul Ryan, won't we?
Well, I think Obama's a compelling communicator. I'm not saying anything about his politics, but he's a compelling communicator.
He can speak. He can speak. Got two left. And Caitlyn.
Reagan. That's what I was
Reagan?
going to say.
Okay.
I'm actually thinking Reagan as well.
All right, Reagan. Any thoughts?
Like the only guy I know, they always say it. So
Is who?
like, I was thinking about Reagan.
Reagan. Okay.
For me, I saw him speak here at Kennesaw State, and that
Clinton?
was just amazing. Yeah.
And after his performance at the Democratic National Convention, it's hard to argue. Hard to argue with the man. We're a small group. What I want to do is I want to give you guys each a card, and I want you to do two things. Keep the card if you want to. You can throw it away at the end, but I want you to turn around and write your name on it, and then stick it here, so I'll know your name. Okay. So if you could just write your name on the back of the card. Stick it in there, and that way, since we're a small group, I can actually use your names. You all know my name's Brian, but I'll forget your names even if we get introduced. Set it there, and I know your name, but I'll give you a card anyway.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And that'll be, then we can sort of talk instead of this being some kind of formal lecture. How many of you are from Georgia? 1, 2, 3 Georgians. Very good. How many of you have had internships or experience in the communications field? JP, where have you had yours?
I actually did a little bit of intern work with a professor at the undergraduate doing just basic little research.
Okay. Who else? And I can't see your name. You're still working on where have you had yours?
Charlene Keller, Communications.
All right. I know those guys.
And the Georgia Department of Economic Development.
Okay. Know them too. Did you work with Allison there, or were you in a different group?
I'm actually under Global Commerce, but we do.
So with
do
Gretchen?
help out. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah. But I help out Allison from time to time.
Okay. You still doing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now.
Good. Who do you report? Who do you work directly with?
I work directly with the account management team.
Okay,
So Dee Ford, Nicole Rateau, and their newest director of account management is Robert Payne.
Okay, I don't know them. And Lindsay, you said you had one?
No.
No? Anybody else? What you got, Kate?
FloridaKeys.com and
Who?
Demand Media. FloridaKeys.com and Demand Media.
FloridaKeys.com and Demand Media. Good. Well, I like to have, before I start talking, I just like to have a basis of who has done what and what their experience is, so that's good. What I'm going to talk about tonight, 4 things, and you guys interrupt me anytime you want to, it's a small group. 4 things that I want to talk about tonight. My story, the story of my agency, the stories of the industry, and then if we feel like it, we can talk about your story and what's going to make you, what's going to help you get a step ahead in this business. Now, you're in an international program. I've done very little international work. So I can't inform a lot about that, but I've seen, I've been a part of an agency that's grown from 10 people to 80 people, from 1 office to 3 offices. The largest, Jackson Spalding is the largest independent communications agency in the state. And I've watched the organization grow over the past 15 years. So you know, we can, I can certainly talk about that. I can give you guys some idea of how you're going to get ahead and whatnot. So let's get started. So I'll tell you a little bit about me, and I'm going to make you work that camera because I like to walk around. Okay. So my story, I'm born in upstate New York. I moved away and lost the accent a long time ago and came south. And so what I did was I then majored in, went to Berry College after high school. I went to high school near Athens, went off to Berry College and majored in journalism. And I wanted to be a sports reporter was my big dream. I wanted to write for Sports Illustrated, write for the Atlanta Journal, do that kind of thing. And so I eventually landed my dream internship. I was at Berry College, and I got to be an intern, not a dream internship, but a good internship. And the Rome News is the daily paper in Rome, and I did that for a whole summer, and it was awesome. And it was painful because I made $4.25 an hour, and I worked 60 hours a week, but they only paid me for 40 hours a week. And I've worked my fanny off the entire summer, and I covered Little League and swimming and high school football, and I loved it. And I did the math at the end of the summer, and I had lost money. I had to take $400 out of my savings that I had made the summer before when I worked at the grocery store, and had to pay my rent at the end of the summer. So I always tell people, you know, the lesson that I learned is I don't mind having a job that doesn't pay much. Write your name on the back of that and slide it in there so I can keep up with who's who. I don't mind having a job that doesn't pay much, and I don't mind working hard, but the two of those going together are very bad news for a career. So at that point I started thinking, am I really going to be able to do this? Can I work 80 hours a week for $4 an hour and keep up with it? Well, the answer was, I was in my senior year, it was really all I knew how to do. So yes, that's where I was going to go. Well, fortunately, circumstances changed. I looked into an internship with Jackson Spalding. The journalism experience was very helpful, and I started as an intern at Jackson Spalding, working at the front desk, pouring coffee, taking care of clients when they walked in, and pouring Cokes, all that kind of good stuff. And we were happy, looking for one more business card. And what I'm going to do is give her someone else's business card, and if you could write your name on the back of that, so I know who you are, that's great. I'm not the person on the other side. So I wound up at Jackson Spalding. That was 15 years ago. We were a company with 8 or 10 people, depending on the time period. All we did was PR. Do y'all know what I'm saying when I mean PR, what we did back then? What do y'all think that consisted of in 1997?
Media relations.
Media relations, right. That's pretty much what we did. We'd write some speeches. We might write a white paper, but 90% of our work was media relations in the agency business back then. My path since then, I worked in Atlanta for 6 years. We don't have titles at Jackson Spalding, so I can't say I became an assistant account manager and then I became an account manager and then an assistant vice president and all that, because we don't do that, and it's a lot of fun. It's a great culture that's created because we don't do that. At other agencies, you'll find that once you get a certain title, you might get a door to your office, or you might get an office and you get all this stuff. Well, we just don't play around with that, and it's a lot of fun. It gets rid of a lot of headaches. So then, after 6 years in Atlanta, I had done some work, but I decided, like you guys, I want to get a master's degree. And more importantly, I promised my wife that we would move back to our hometown of Watkinsville, Georgia, outside of Athens, eventually, and she was ready to go home. And so after 6 years, I went in and told the guys who owned the firm, Glenn Jackson and Bo Spalding, that I needed to move home, and I was going to pursue my master's degree and eventually get a PhD and start teaching. And I guess I didn't know it at the time, but they had other plans for me. And they said, well, we want to see if you can keep working for us. And I said, guys, I'm not going to drive in every day. I did that as an intern. I did it for 4 months, and it was crazy. And they said, well, why don't you work from out there, and we'll give it a try, and you go and start on your master's degree, and we'll see how that works. And I started, enrolled at UGA, started on that path, and I soon found that I didn't like it. And I don't think UGA was a place that was geared towards professional experience like this place is. I think it sounds like you guys are getting a degree that'll help you with your professional aspirations. UGA was not that kind of experience at that time. It's a little bit different now. And but what I did find was I realized how lucky I was to work at a great company like Jackson Spalding, and I'll tell you more about Jackson Spalding. So that was 9 or 10 years ago. I opened an office in Athens. If you can call it an office, it was about the size of, if you put together those two boards together up there, that was about the size of my office. It was in an old building in downtown Watkinsville. It was me, and then it was me and an intern, and then we've slowly grown, and today we have 9 full-time people, 1 part-time, and 4 interns in our office in Athens. One of those people is a graphic designer. We serve about 15 or 20 clients from there, all across the spectrum, from the University of Georgia to the Atlanta Falcons to some of the larger companies in Georgia. Our team members are part of the broader teams that take care of those. So So it's been exciting to see that happen. So along the way, Jackson Spalding was changing. How do y'all think an agency has changed since 1997?
Integrating new media.
New media, that's part of it. Technology. What else has changed since 1997?
Media and news have all sped up.
Media and news has sped up. Growth of employees, that's a big change. Yep. Any other ideas? The biggest change has been, as I said earlier, when in 1997 it was almost all media relations, right? Now I guess media relations is maybe 40% of our revenues at the most. So we've gone from 90% to about 40% in that amount of time. So a huge change in our business. Now what you've seen is a lot of agencies like ours have stayed the same size or shrunk. It's kind of like they're still, if you ever heard the term, you're making buggy whips. Does that make sense to you guys? That means you're making a product that serves an industry that's dying. So if you're making a buggy whip but nobody's using buggies, you might make really good buggy whips, but at the end of the day you're going to go out of business. Okay, so a lot of agencies stayed still, and we're still doing media relations even as the media was shrinking. And that's really what's happened. The media has shrunk. So if we'd have just stayed and kept doing media relations really well, we would be okay, because there's still some media to do, but we wanted to continue growing. And if the media is not growing, media relations isn't growing. So let's just say that media has shrunk by just 10%. Well, that part of our shop has may grow a little bit because we do it better than other people, but it's not going to grow as fast. So what we quickly realized we realized that probably in 1998, 1999 is we needed to become a more integrated shop. Okay, so it sounds like you guys have an integrated program around advertising and around creative and design and all that kind of stuff, right? Is that important to you guys here? Are you guys learning about that? So we became an integrated shop, and we slowly built a graphic design expertise in-house. We added a video expertise in-house. We added a training expertise in-house. We added photography expertise in-house. We added web expertise in-house. We added a tremendous amount of resources in-house that help us serve the entire marketing spectrum for our clients. Okay, so that was incredibly important for us, and incredibly important. That's what's allowed us to grow into such a significant firm, while most of the people that were the same size as us in 1997 or 2002 have stayed the same size. You mentioned social media. I think Madison, which of you said social media? Was it? I can't remember.
New media.
With new media, we've added a social media director. We have 2 or 3 people who do nothing but social as well. So really what we've done is decided to expand our services to encompass that entire continuum of communication. And that was really the most important strategic decision we could make in terms of what we provided. The other really important thing that we've done, I talked a little bit about our culture. If you hear about Jackson Spalding, you'll hear a lot about culture. Do you guys talk at all, though? I don't even know if you talk about that in school, though, like the culture of where you want to work. I'm sure you've all worked at different places, right? If you haven't worked in the field. And how many of you have had a horrible work experience? And so what was so terrible? What was so terrible about it, Kate? What's your worst one? Micromanagement. Okay. JP, what was bad about your?
I didn't raise my hand.
What?
Did not raise my hand.
You did not raise your hand.
It was me.
Okay. What was yours?
I'm bartending.
Bartending. Yeah. Okay. I got you. Who else raised their hand? Go ahead. What is it?
Customer care.
Well, consumer care.
Customer care.
Customer care. Okay. All right. But what about that? Was it the customers that drove you crazy?
It was speaking. All I did every day was speak phone calls, and I had to speak a minute.
So you were stuck doing something that you didn't enjoy?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Who else had one? Lindsay?
Micromanaging and incompetence.
Micromanaging and incompetence. So, at Jackson Spalding, what has always made us, our secret sauce, so to speak, has been our culture. And what people say about our culture that, is there's no titles, which eliminates a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of arguing. For some people, it also makes them a little uncomfortable. How am I progressing? How am I growing? What does my path look like? I tell people, if you come to our company, you've got to be pretty self-assured. And by that I mean you're not going to have, you don't have this ladder that you're going to be climbing. You've got to be very confident in who you are. You've got to be comfortable being defined by the great work that you do, not a title on your business card. Okay? That's very different than most of the other agencies, but we think it's important. But the ultimate sign of whether or not your culture is working is when we go on an annual retreat every year, and every year one of the questions we get is, what are you going to do to preserve the culture? Well, we got that question when there were 12 people. I probably asked it then. We got that question when there were 25 people. We got that question when there's 50 people. We got that question now when there's 75 or 80 people. And what it tells us is there's something worth keeping here, right? People still love it. The ultimate sign, other great sign of that is people don't leave very often. And when they do leave, it's for a big corporate job. It's not typically to go to another agency or another place with the same experience. Now, what we look for when we're hiring, we look for something called the 5 C's. And the 5 C's are character, competence, class, confidence, and chemistry. Let me see if I can get those. Character, competence, class, confidence, chemistry. 5 C's, okay? That's the values that we look for when we hire at Jackson Spalding. Every one of those are critical skills and values that we look for. What do you think? So those are the 5 values we look for, and they're all just absolutely critical to our business. Character means honesty, and if you've all been studying this industry for a while, you understand the reputation sometimes that PR people have. It's not one of honesty. It's this term, you're a flack, you're spinning, you're BSing, all this kind of stuff. Well, I'm here to say, it doesn't really matter where you're working, the only brand that you've got in this business is your name. Okay, it's your name. And you never want to work anywhere where someone asks you to tell a lie, to not tell the truth, to do something that you're uncomfortable with your name, because it's very easy for you to lose everything that you've worked really hard for because one client pushes you to do something that you shouldn't have to do. So it's very important that when you go to work somewhere that you're working, whether you're on the agency side or the corporate side or the nonprofit side, that you're somewhere where you feel comfortable with the values of the organization and that people believe in those values. And that sounds kind of hokey, but it is really important. It's really important with everything you hear in this about corporate entities today, with people are putting in front of you. So Jackson Spalding, the other thing that I would say sets us apart is the loyalty of our clients. We have a lot of clients that have been with us, a few that have been with us since our founding. Most of our clients are around for 5 or 6 years. The trend in the industry is very much a churn and burn sort of situation. It's you have a client for 2 or 3 years and then you're constantly turning them over. Can you guys tell me a few reasons why that may be expensive to operate that way? Why is it expensive to do that?
It takes a lot of time and resources to maybe get to know a client and understand their vision.
It takes a lot to do that, but more importantly, what's the other thing that when you lose one you have to do? Go get another one. And getting a large client, we're in the middle of pitching a major auto manufacturer right now. I'm guessing we'll put $40,000 or $50,000 worth of time into that. So when you think about, we're basically losing $40,000 or $50,000 worth of billable time in order to pitch this business. Well, if we were losing a client that size every year and had to go out and replace that business, it would be tremendously expensive for us. So loyalty among our people is important because the people are what help us keep the clients, but then loyalty among those clients themselves is absolutely critical to our success. So we talked a little bit about how our agencies evolved. We talked a little bit, one thing I did mention, I have an office in Athens. We also opened one in Dallas. The Dallas office is up to 4 or 5 people at this point. So we do have some branch offices. We've also allowed talented people to go work in places like San Diego and Savannah and Florida and Chicago. So if we have a really talented person, we're comfortable letting them go work somewhere else. Now, everybody doesn't get to do that, but if they're critical to a large piece of business, that's fine. Today, the largest clients of Jackson Spalding, Delta Airlines, Chick-fil-A, Orkin, the commercial and residential piece of the business. So you guys probably hear about residential Orkin. Commercial is almost as big for Orkin, which means they're coming into facilities like this and helping with pest control. Children's Health Care, Primrose Schools, University of Georgia are all very significant clients for us. And then a lot of the others are, are companies you might not have heard of, but are actually, Rogers Electric, Industrial Developments International, several real estate, Cousins Properties, and other real estate developers. And then we also do a lot of project work. And the most interesting projects tend to be crisis work. Has anybody ever been involved in a crisis in your internships or other things? Something you define as a crisis role? Something goes wrong, somebody does something wrong. Anybody ever been involved in anything like that? You have? What was it? What was it?
I had a technician show up to site.
You what?
I had a technician show up to site with an inappropriate saying on the shirt.
Okay.
And then still thought.
Okay. All right. So the crises that we're called on to deal with a lot of times are when a company goes bankrupt, when the CEO is leaving, when the department burns down, when there's an employee does something improper somewhere, when there's a murder, somebody's killed, something that threatens the existence of our client is what we typically define as a crisis. And it's one of the most, it's one of the best opportunities you have to learn a tremendous amount very quickly in your career. I often tell people your career trajectory is kind of like this. And as a young person, when you smell a crisis coming or you have that crisis opportunity, it's an opportunity for you to take your trajectory like this. And the reason is you have the opportunity to work on a very critical issue, typically with very senior people, and learn skills that you haven't all in a period of 2 or 3 weeks typically. And so it's almost like it's a turbocharge for your career. So once you're out there, seek out those opportunities, even if it means you've got to work some extra to do that. I got put on one about 3 years into my career that involved the bankruptcy of one of the country's largest retailers. Well, all of a sudden I was on the front line of 100 phone calls a day. I was counseling the CEO, helping to define and refine his position to announce the eventual acquisition of the company, what their strategy was moving forward. I learned a tremendous amount all in the period of 2 or 3, 80 or 90 hour weeks. So keep your eyes open for those opportunities and jump on them when they come along because it's your chance to shine. So that's a little bit about me. It's a little bit about Jackson Spalding. The evolution of this business. When I started, the business was very segmented. So there were advertising agencies. There was the newspaper world. There were PR agencies. Today, as you guys can imagine, all of that is very blended. Even the line between news and PR is blended to some degree with a lot of the websites that are out there. There's still, these silos still exist. There are still ad shops, there's PR shops, there's social shops, and there's journalists. But I think the best of the best are the ones where the lines are being blurred, and you can bring an account team together that can service those things in-house or in very close collaboration with someone else. So, and that's really been the strength for Jackson Spalding, and that's the big change in this industry. And I think social, frankly, has driven a lot of that. And I think social has also given PR the opportunity to be the leader, because social, to a large degree, is about messaging. It's not about a stunt. It's not about a caricature. It's not about a clever advertisement, but it's about messaging. And I think messaging is probably the most authentic thing that we can deliver as communications professionals. A smart campaign is great. A gimmick to get the newspaper is great. But if it doesn't have the core message, the message that relates to the brand essence of your client, then you're wasting a lot of money. Okay, and I think that's why it's so critical that that you always start with what the key messages are in everything that you do. So, so that's my take on where the industry is and where that goes. Now let's talk about a couple qualities that I think are very important for you guys to understand as students. Throw a few things at me that you've heard that you think are going to make, you're coming to interview for Jackson Spalding. What are the qualities that you think are going to be important to an agency like ours for a job candidate? That's good. Those are values. What are the technical skills you think that we're going to look for?
Teamwork.
Teamwork. That's
Writing
good.
management.
What's that?
Writing.
Writing skills. Okay. Proactiveness.
Analytical.
What?
Analytical.
Analytical.
Time management.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Creativity.
Creativity is very good.
How about consistency?
Consistency. All those are very good. Here's the ones that came to mind for me when I was thinking about this before I came up. Work ethic. Okay? Something that's that simple, but something that you don't always find in folks. You guys probably have it. You're motivated enough to be here. But a work ethic means you're just going to be willing to sit down and crank out the work. You may not like it all, but you're going to do it without complaining. You're going to say, oh, it stinks that I'm not on the cool client. I really, but you bring a good attitude and you work hard. So work ethic. is very important. That's nuts and bolts, but it's really critical if you want to get anywhere. Innovation and entrepreneurship. You know, there are a lot of competent, to use one of those C's that we have, and we expect competence. What I really look for, though, for somebody to take it to the next level is somebody who brings a smart idea to me that shows, even if it doesn't work right now, it shows potential. You're thinking about, here's a way that we can make a little bit more money. Here's a way that we can take this to the next level. Here's something that we can sell to a client that's going to appeal to them. A good example is we hired a former newspaper reporter a few years ago named Scott Hartman. You probably, those of you who grew up around here might remember the last name Hartman. His dad was Bill Hartman. He was on Channel 2. He was a sports reporter for years and years. Scott is his son. Scott had been following in his dad's footsteps, and he was kind of working his way up the sports reporter ranks. But he was in Macon, and kind of like me, he realized, okay, I'm going to have to go to like Topeka, and then I'm going to have to move to Raleigh, and then I may get a chance to come back to Atlanta when I'm 50 years old and be the news anchor in sports, but do I really want to follow that path? And so Scott came to work for us. And, you know, we kind of put him in that box and said, you know, do PR stuff, that's great. And he was good at it. But Scott also realized after a couple months, you know, I think we could probably do a corporate video business. And Scott created an entire video enterprise within our company that probably generates 5 or 6% of our revenues now, maybe more than that, has 5 or 6 people doing nothing but that, and is a very valuable service to our client. None of us, we might have imagined we could do that, but none of us had, you know, the skills or the ability to do that. So Scott, at age 26, 27, created a whole video division for our company. We had another woman who used to work for NBC, and she came in and said, you know, we're doing all these media trainings, we're teaching people how to deal with the media. I think we can do more than media training. I think we can train people to stand up in front of crowds of 500 people and deliver an incredible address. So she started a group called JS Cultivation, and all they do all day long now is train people on how to do an outstanding job at podiums, with the media, at other places. And again, there were other people in town doing those things, but when we brought them in-house, all of a sudden we could sell that to our clients. And then again, another, you know, built another revenue stream for our firm. So when I say entrepreneurship, innovation, you guys as young people bring ideas to us that we're never going to think of, okay? I mean, we're, you know, bring that creativity, bring what you see, bring those insights that you get out in the field and bring them to us. Patience is a big one, especially for your generation, okay? Everybody in this group wants to be a vice president. They want to run. They want to be running an account within 2 years of the time they're out. I like ambition, but show a little bit of patience when you walk in the door, and it goes a long way. It goes a long way. People will notice if you're doing great work, but they'll notice it faster if you're doing great work, but you're also kind of like, you know, I wish I could be leading X by now. You know, you've got to be patient, and I'm a big believer in patience. Communication skills in general. You mentioned, Tracy, you said writing. Writing is important. Being able to speak is important. Being able to sit down at a table and talk intelligently is important. If you don't have great communication skills, you need to think about whether you need to be in this field, especially if you're going to grow to be a leader in this field. You've got to be a compelling communicator. Why do you have to be a compelling communicator? Clients don't want to take advice on communications from somebody who's no good at communications. Okay? I'm not saying you couldn't go and work at a nonprofit or go work at a corporation and be a very good writer and do fine. But if you really want to grow into the leader, if you really want to run a department, if you want to have your own budget, if you want to run an organization that's communications oriented, you need to build the rest of those communication skills. I was a reporter when I came out. I wasn't a good speaker. You know, I could speak. I was pretty good on my feet. But you've got to teach yourself. You've got to continue to learn and continue to do those things and seek out those opportunities. If you're not a good writer, work on it. If you don't have that attention to detail in your emails are sloppy, work on it. If you're using emoticons and professional correspondence, work on it. If your Facebook page is not reflective of who you are or who your employers want to see you being, you need to work on it. Great communicators are what we're looking for. Everybody doesn't have to be a Pulitzer winning writer. We love talented writers, but I also need somebody who can stand up and sell ice to an Eskimo. I need to have somebody who makes somebody want to hire Jackson Spalding. I need to hire somebody who can go to a cocktail party and in a very natural way meet about 15 people and then take about 6 months and turn those 5 of those people into clients. I need people who have that skill set, and that's important. The last thing I would say is staying engaged with the community and the world around you. So many people don't read the newspaper, don't know what's going on. I have people sometimes, believe it or not, in interviews when I say, what do you read every day? They say TMZ. Might be true, probably not the best answer. Pay attention to what's going on in your community. I'm not saying you got to get out the old newspaper and and read it with your cereal. None of you guys probably do that anymore. But but you need to know what's going on in your community, or at least in the world where you want to work. So many people don't take the time to stay engaged, and it's so easy. There's more information than ever, but you've got to stay engaged and know what's going on. The other place that comes in handy is when you're trying to be that person who's selling, that communicator, that great communicator. The more you know about, the more common ground you have with everybody you're going to run into and meet. That could be somebody like a reporter, if you're still doing media relations. There's nothing more awkward than sitting down with somebody and having nothing to talk about. I'm sure you've all been there and done that. But it's incumbent on us as communications professionals to really know what's going on and being able to find common ground with somebody. So that's what I would say is 5 things in addition to the 5 C's for you guys to think about and think about growing those skills. And you're graduating in December, but you still have a lot of opportunities, to work on those things. And I don't expect somebody to have all 5 of those things when I hire them. I really don't. What I expect is that they have the potential to have all. I expect them to. I'm not going to hire somebody without the 5 C's. Okay, nobody's coming to Jackson Spalding without the 5 C's, and if they make it through the door, they're going to be gone in about 3 months if they don't have the 5 C's. But those are the 5 things that are really required to grow to the absolute top of the profession. So I've talked for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, so I'm going to let y'all ask me questions, and I may talk some more if you don't, so I would encourage you all to ask questions, and so I don't have to just blather on. Okay, what you got, Kate?
You said the only brand you've got in this business is your name. What are some ways that we can be proactive about promoting our own brand?
Well, I would tell you as someone who is going to be, is anybody going on to get a PhD, or are y'all looking for jobs? 1, 2, 3. When I came out, there wasn't much you could do. Now there's a ton of things you can do. Do you have a compelling blog that shows what a great writer you are? Do you have a compelling website where all your work is? Where your photography is? Somebody in here has got a website with photography. But have you been published anywhere? I mean, when I'm going to interview, I'll pick on Caitlyn because I know her last name. But if I'm going to interview Caitlyn Barron, in the 5 minutes I have to prepare before she walks in, I will print her resume. I will Google her name, so I will see what is out there that she's done. Okay, so if I get a Facebook link and nothing else, or like something from where she was quoted in the newspaper in high school about a canned food drive or something, that kind of concerns me, Now, if I see a CV on the Kennesaw State website, I see a photography website, or Kate, if it's you, and I say, wow, she's got an impressive website, she's got her resume there, she's got everything that she's done, she's passionate about animals, she's passionate about world affairs, and she's passionate about, handicrafts. Hey, that's kind of cool. I don't really care what it is that you like. What I want to see is that you've thought about how you're perceived and you know how to use these tools. You may take that down the day after you get hired, but it makes me feel good because I know you can do that for a client and that you can apply that thinking to your client. The bad things you can do, I alluded to earlier, and I'm sure you guys have been beating over the drum with this, but don't be profane on your Twitter. Don't be silly on Facebook. Don't have crazy pictures out there. I mean, just think about all that stuff. You're going into the communications business. You don't need that kind of stuff floating around out there. Don't have your music blog linked anywhere where somebody can find it, where you talk about how awesome, how drunk you got at Music Midtown, or that stuff happens all the time. Especially with creative types and designers. Where they want to be a little bit edgy. Well, if you only want to work at a company that's edgy, be edgy. If you want to work at a company like ours, or a company where that might concern them, know about that. Showing them off the first day, all that kind of basic stuff. Think about the culture of the company you're applying to and make sure it's a culture that works for you. But there's a ton of things you can do to enhance your own brand. Other little things I look for: have you been published anywhere? Do you write letters to the editor? Have you been published in the school newspaper if it exists? Do you have thoughtful posts or blog posts anywhere? Have you ever written a guest editorial to a publication? Do you have design skills that you've showed off somewhere, somehow? Have you done some free work for, a nonprofit in your community? That kind of stuff. Yeah. Keep all that stuff. Don't get rid of it. Put it on your website. Show it off. You guys are supposed to, I expect young people to know how to do interactive stuff. So y'all need to know how to do interactive stuff. If you haven't learned at this point, teach yourself something. I read the Athens Banner Herald, because that's where my office is headquartered. I read the Atlanta Journal. I get several emails that are summaries of all the news in Georgia that I read. I try to read the Wall Street Journal. I read a lot of Twitter. I'm a cyclist, so I read a cycling website every day. I check the Atlanta Business Chronicle every day, and I read it every Friday. If you want to be in business in Atlanta, you need to get in the habit of reading that or finding that. That's probably what I read, in addition to a million other things that cross my desk, but those are sort of my staples.
Do you have any tips for pitching press releases?
For pitching press releases? Well, I think number one is assess the news value of what you're pitching. Is it something that's newsworthy? Are you pitching the right person? I tell my young people, I think you should plan on 15 minutes of pitch. And the reason I say that is because I think it takes 15 minutes to really research at every media outlet who the right person is who should get it, what they've covered before, and it gives you the ability to have a conversation with them and a rationale for calling them. For example, you're working for the Department of Economic Development, right? So you said. So, odds are somebody has sent out a press release and may give you a list and say, call these people and follow up to see if they got this press release. Well, rather than calling up and saying, hey, I just want to check and see if you got this press release, the ability to say, I've seen that you've covered the expansions of these sort of plants before. We've got a really interesting case in Georgia. We sent you something last week, but I wanted to follow up and see if you might have some interest in it, and have that conversational sort of mature tone, so you don't sound just like the other 80 times that they get that phone call. Actually, anymore, they probably don't get as many phone calls as they do email. So I think the courage to make a phone call is also really hard for your generation. How many of you, I bet you all, do you all text more than you use a phone?
I always email.
Do you feel when somebody asks you to follow up, is it hard for you to just pick up the phone and call a random person and ask them about it? It is for me too. It's don't.
Unless there's a time crunch.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I just go straight to email.
Yeah, and email is so easy. If you ask, I bet if you ask the reporter how many emails, especially to big media, they're getting. I think I get a lot a day. They're probably getting 400 a day. It's very hard to cut through the clutter. But when you can do something that's personal and focused, or you can pick up the phone and sort of break through that with them. Time of day is very important. So if it's a daily paper, call between 10 and 1. Don't call after, so call in the morning. 10 and 1 is sort of the golden hour, because after that they tend to get on deadline and get real busy, but it's a little easier in the morning. If it's a weekly, know the day of the week that they publish and call the day after. So they've got a whole week to take what you've given them and set something up. So those are some easy things. The other one is, as you're in the business a long time, you've got to find ways to build relationships. And you've got to see what people, for big reporters, what are they saying on Twitter, what are they into, where are they going, find a way to get to know them outside of the office. And that's hard, because they're always a little suspect to PR folks. But if you find some common ground with someone, again, that's my point about what are you into, what do you know about, and then you find some common ground, and you have you actually get to be friends with folks. And you can't leverage that. It's just, you have to. What it does is it makes you much more circumspect about what you're going to send and what you're going to say, and you're going to understand that you're going to be able to tell your client they aren't going to go for this, and you don't need to waste your time and my money pitching them on this. And that's hard to do. A lot of clients just want to say, I just want to be sure you send it to 50 people. I don't care how many it ran at. And I'd rather say, look, let me really have a conversation with 5 people that I know may be interested in this, and they may actually be able to use it for something.
Aside from the loyalty of the clients, how does Jackson Spalding brand their name? How do you get your name out there?
We get our name out a lot of ways. The biggest of which is community engagement, community involvement. We give our people tremendous flexibility to be engaged in the community. And we think it's good for 2 reasons. Number one is, we think it's great to have our name out there, but more importantly, in a business where a lot of times it feels like you're just sort of working for the man, you're watching every 15 minutes of your day, and you're charting that, and you're billing that. It can get a little soulless if you're at a traditional agency. So what we try to do is allow our people, young and old, pick a community and organization that you want to get engaged with, and get engaged and go to work. I've got a guy working for me who's 23 years old. He's 6 months out of the College of Charleston, and he's on the board for a nonprofit in Atlanta that he's thrilled about. And we'll give him the flexibility to put in, 10 hours a month on the clock for that. At a big agency, no way, no way. Only their most senior people are serving and out there doing that. For us, we think it's essential for our people, number one, to be able to share their talents with not-for-profits and other organizations in the community, and number two, for their happiness to be able to be out there serving and working for people. But as we've grown, we've had more traditional marketing things. I mean, we'll do little things like this. These sort of things that we give out at events. We have we advertise. We have a social media team that's active. We do promotional videos. We do things called JS Jams, where 3 times a year we have a panel of speakers on a topic that would interest our client, and we bring in the best and brightest of our clients and of our prospects and some of the best leaders in the state, and they come into our office and hear sort of from the mountaintop. When it was social media, when social media was new, we had folks from CNN and Coke come in and talk about that. Maybe it's ethics, maybe it's leadership. We have people come in and talk about those sort of things. What are the other ways? I mean, we're in the process of developing a new website. It's a classic example. If the cobbler's kids have no shoes, our site isn't anything special right now, but we're working to improve it. We compete for awards when that's appropriate. We don't do as much of that as a lot of agencies, but we do a little bit of that. But really, our people are our best marketing, and that's why I talk again about what we want are compelling communicators. Every person who works at Jackson Spalding represents us in the community. And you have to understand how important that is. So your brand on some level is tied in with our brand. But there's no better marketing than having 80 people out there saying this is a great company. We'd love to work for you. We'd love to help you. And there's no worse marketing than having, at another company, having 80 people out there saying this sucks,
I just got back from a conference in Harvard University.
I heard about you. You were getting some rave reviews before we started. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So,
congratulations.
Thank you so much. And one thing we had, at all the panels we had, there was a misconception of what corporate social responsibility was.
Mm-hmm.
There were different people from different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. So I was going to ask you, what do you define corporate social responsibility?
Wow. And you said there were different answers or wrong answers?
There were I can say that's the thing. One person actually said someone else's definition was wrong. Mm-hmm. And another person, it was a terrible discussion.
Terrible discussion?
Yes.
Well, then we won't spend too much time on it, will we? That wouldn't be good. Corporate social responsibility. I think it requires a holistic, this is going to be a terrible definition, I haven't thought about it. I think it's the responsibility a corporation has to examine all aspects of its business and analyze the cost benefit to its shareholders versus its other constituents, and put in place a set of values that allow it to make decisions that are fair to all concerned.
That's the thing. Who do you call the shareholders?
Well, the shareholders would be the owners. The other constituents would be the customers. They'd be the people who live around, say, a corporation's facilities or are impacted by the actions that it takes. Well, obviously, different people are going to have different definitions of that. Some people are going to say a company that makes plastic bottles is ruining the whole world because they're floating around in the Pacific Ocean in this giant jeer in the ocean. Others are going to say, well, it's really just the people near the factory who are impacted by that. So I think that's why it's such a sticky and complicated term. Social responsibility in general is a sticky and complicated term. Even if you take off corporate, what's your social responsibility? I mean, what's your, what are you gonna, what's our own social responsibility? So, are we really thinking about that? Are we analyzing that? Are we deciding, me driving my car up here, even though it's a hybrid, was probably irresponsible in someone's mind. I probably should have done this via video conference. So it's a little bit of a trick question in my mind, because I think it's, I think it's very ill-defined whether it's personal or corporate. But but I do think corporations have a responsibility to consider the people who are directly impacted by the activities that they may have, and to take some steps to modify their actions when necessary. But I think a lot of it, frankly, there are a lot of unintended consequences to those kind of laws that create costs to the end consumers that are also very negative too. You know, so for example, people don't understand, you know, doing a lot of business in China can be really negative, but there's also a ton of poor people in America who can only afford to buy goods because they're made there. So sometimes that side of the equation is never thought of. So there's a lot of different levels to it. It's outside my pay grade though. I could see why it was a messy argument. What you got?
What are, I can't talk. Some advice that you could give for like crisis communication and crisis PR? Like, what's the best way to kind of handle those situations?
Crises in general?
Yeah, just sort of like the sticky situations where...
I'll tell you, the biggest rule of a crisis is get your information before you say something. And a lot of times you get hit in a crisis for not responding fast enough. And a lot of times that's not a fair criticism. Because a lot of times you can do a lot more damage by going out with something when you know that's not the correct information. I'll give you an example. Does everybody remember the situation, was a very complicated situation at Duke a few years ago where there was an alleged rape by the rugby team? And man, people piled on, the administration piled on them before all the information was out there. Well, the information comes out and basically none of it's true. But so you had the reputations of people ruined, you had jobs lost, you had all kinds of things done because that information wasn't gathered. And so the most common mistake, I think, is especially in this hyper-fast media environment, is to respond very strongly before you have all the information that you need in order to deliver a response. So I think that's my rule number one is, do I have all the right information so I can, it may feel good to have a great response now, but it may really come back and embarrass you later if you don't have all the information with what you're going to say. So that's a very important rule for crisis management. Having a plan in the first place, or at least a protocol, so that you can get in touch with your people and understand where people are and who's going to lead the charge on a response is also very important. Not letting your lawyer run over everybody else in that situation is very important, especially when the court of public opinion is involved. Lawyers are great at dealing with the court of law, but a lot of times lawyers don't think about the damage to a brand that comes from the recommendations that they might make. And so that's very important as well. So that's 3 things to think about at the start of a crisis.
So how about balancing work and like life in general? Because PR being something that you have to be on top of, image and reputation 24/7, 365.
That's a great question. We talk a lot about work-life balance in our company because it is hard. I can't remember anybody, I think Trevelino Keller, did you keep time by the 15 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anybody else had an internship in an agency? You were too, so you keep your time. That's, you know, it is hard to, and then did you have a goal? You had to, how many hours a day did you have to bill?
It was 20 hours a week. 20
hours a week that you worked? So is there like a billable expectation for you, or did you just do what you could? Okay. So I'll just walk y'all through what it's like for a young person in an agency. Our young people start, they have to bill 7 hours of time per day. Okay, so 7 hours. So if you think about it, you start at 8:30, you finish it, ideally, we work 8:30 to 5:30, that's a 9-hour block, right? Is that right? Yeah, 9 hours. You say you have an hour-long lunch. So you really, okay, you think 7 hours out of that I got to be billable, that isn't bad. Well, you know, your friend sends you a web link you want to look at, you want to check your Facebook, you got to check a couple internal emails, and all of a sudden, you know, it's 5 o'clock and you've only got 5 hours in. Well, nobody's going to come and say the next day, well, you only billed 5 hours, what's the problem? But you do, you need to meet your goal, you're charged with meeting your goal, and so over the course of the week, you've got to bill 35 hours, right? So if you aren't efficient when you're at work, if you don't have that work ethic, if other things distract you, you can wind up spending 50 or 60 hours to meet your goal. Now, if you're efficient and you're busy, that's not a problem. You can do it. But if you like to have a chat at the water cooler, you like to do those things at Jackson Spalding, I don't care. If you're not missing your deadline and you're getting your work done, you know, I really don't care if it takes you 60 hours a week to get it done. But don't complain to me that it's taking me 60 hours a week to get it done. But most of our people, in fact, work very efficiently. When we get concerned is when we see somebody who's at 120% of their billable for more than 1 or 2 weeks in a row. Then we know we have a problem, and we kind of have an intervention and talk with them. Now, that's at Jackson Spalding. Jackson Spalding is known, we don't kill our people because we have a good culture. We want to keep our people. At a traditional agency, you walk into a Fleischman Hillard, Edelman, they're going to expect you to bill 8 hours a day. out of the gate. So they're going to expect an extra hour out of you, an extra 5 hours out of you a week. They expect you, that's called 100% utilized. They're going to expect you to be 100% utilized a day. So when do you do all that other stuff? Well, you do that during your lunch, you do it before, you do it after, you work a lot longer, you work a lot harder. So it's very hard to keep that work-life balance. That's why typically at those agencies you have a 2 or 3 year run and then you leave. You go somewhere else. You get that time on your resume and then you go somewhere that actually allows you to have a life where you're not having to work on Saturday and Sunday all the time to get there. But we try not to do that at Jackson Spalding because we don't want our people to have that sort of experience. We want our talented people to stay with us and be with us for a long time. Other things, that help with us, are what I talked about earlier, getting involved in something in the community, get involved in a professional organization when you're, something that you enjoy though, that you're passionate about. If you're into tennis, do a tennis league, do other things like that. Just really make time for yourself and enjoy it. And find, again, I said this earlier, find a company that shares your values. If you want to work hard, you don't mind working 80 or 90 hours a week, there's a lot of corporations in Atlanta that would love to have you come do that. Okay? And a talented, smart person who's just going to go in there and crank it out, that's great. And if that's what you want, go do it and make good money and go after it. If that's not what you want, then don't go to work and find a company that meets that's a little more in line with what your expectations are. Understand you have to work hard, but also understand every company has a different set of expectations about what they are. But ask good questions during your interviews. Do people here work on Saturdays a lot? Do you work on weekends? How much is the boss here? Ask the person you're interviewing with, when are you here? Because they're there, then they may expect you to be there. So, but we put a lot of emphasis on it at Jackson Spalding, but I think it's something that sets us apart, that we care about that. We take our people on retreats. We have summer hours where we let people off an hour early on Fridays, or an hour and a half early. We do a lot of different things so that we have some balance. But even with that, when the client calls, I'll tell you what, when the client leans on you, then you have to deliver. So there's a lot of times our people, you're out of balance for, as we call it, out of balance for, you'll be out of balance for 2 or 3 weeks, but that comes with the territory. If you're going to be any kind of consultant, you got to do what the client says. But when our client puts a consistent demand on a person that they're out of balance, then we have an intervention at that point.
Would you say it's true that agencies have a high turnover rate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, a lot of agencies are just sweatshops. I mean, it is what it is, and it requires you to be very to juggle multiple accounts, to juggle multiple projects, and some people would rather sort of settle into a steady pace and work at one place. I would say you learn faster, probably in an agency environment. You learn more. You learn about client service. The opportunities for advancement are faster, but it's like anything else, higher risk, high reward. So, but yeah, agencies definitely, I would say, have a much stronger turnover, unless it's a corporation with just a bad culture, So.
What's your advice for getting started that way too? Like getting your, just stepping out of school and.
I mean, an internship's critical, and if you haven't had one yet, you should expect to probably start with an internship. It's basically what probably a paid internship is going to be your path, unless you're going into a not-for-profit sort of situation. Those folks will typically take talented folks. What I said earlier about having your brand out there a little bit while you're in school, you have so many opportunities to, just to sort of be in a laboratory. So, do you have a blog? What do I see when I Google you? Does your resume show, does your resume show a website? Does your resume show a Twitter handle? Are you socially savvy? Do you know how to use these different social media tools? What are you going to come in and show me in terms of a portfolio or on a laptop that you've managed to accomplish, or on an iPad when you come in to interview? Set yourself apart in an interview. I mean, I see tons of sharp young men and young women. Some of them forget to write a thank you note. Some of them forget to ever say thanks. Some of them do stuff that's outlandishly creative, and I never forget them. One of our smartest young people came in and interviewed with us, and we were already impressed with her because she had a blog that talked, it was a food review. She was in Athens, and she was doing her own food review website called Dog Food. And we thought, well, that's really clever. We wanted to see her. So she came in and did that. She was really sharp. She interviewed with us. She had high energy, very communicative, impressed you sitting down with you. She was not a bump on a log. And then after she left, somebody stopped by, and sitting on our receptionist desk was this dog food bowl with dog food painted on the side and candy in it for us and said courtesy of the dog food lady.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, you're kind of like, well, that's a no-brainer. I mean, because if she's thinking that creatively about how to follow up with us, she's going to think that creatively and blow our clients away. So think about what you can do to sell yourself within the culture of the place that you want to interview and what's going to set you apart.
Touching on one more thing, with you mentioned portfolios and stuff too. Is there a specific way you like to see them, like traditional binder, or you know, you mentioned iPad or even website?
You know, I don't really care how they're shown. What I want to see is results. Like, I don't want to see a bunch of press releases you wrote for a class. What I'd like to see is a press release that you wrote for the Georgia Department of Economic Development and 3 articles that resulted from it that you pitched. Or I'd like to see the summary. You know, I'd like to see a, you know, I don't know, a really thoughtful fashion, you know, I don't care if it's about fashion, I don't care what it is, something that shows me how you write, something that shows me how you think, something that's somewhat creative, something that frankly shows me results, the courage to pick up the phone. You know, it's impressive when I see a press release that somebody wrote and then I see the stuff that happened after, but did you do that or did somebody else take it and pitch it? Did you write that? Did you pitch it? What did you do with it? Do you have video stuff that you've shot, that you've done? Bring in the iPad and show me that. You have great graphic work that you've done. It doesn't have to be perfect, but show me living, breathing work that you've done outside of class. I mean, it's very easy in a college environment. And you guys are all talented enough that you can volunteer your time. You know, you presented a paper at Harvard. I mean, that's going to set you apart from 98% of the other people who are out there. You know, so I have no idea what it was about. Maybe you solved corporate social responsibility. If you have, that's great. But I mean, you know, but you know, have some stuff like that to show me. I mean, even if you go home over Christmas break and volunteer for 2 weeks at the pet shelter and you get a pet of the week thing in the newspaper, that's something, you know? I mean, so don't spend 5 years in college and come out with nothing to show for it. You know, I mean, have some stuff ready to show. I don't really care how it's presented, but don't slide a resume across to me and that'd be all you've got. You know, I mean, if you've got an internship, for God's sake, come out of it with something to show me, you know? Don't lose it, you know? And if you're in an internship where you're not getting that kind of stuff, ask and say, look, I'd really love to do something that I can carry forward and show when I'm out of here. You know, what are those things? I mean, for some people, it's just simply redesigning a newsletter somebody's been doing the same way forever. I mean, all you guys, I'm sure you've all learned about that. You can do that. So you got to have something. You don't have to, but it's really going to help. Unless you're just Bill Clinton sitting across the table from you. So.